Hello, welcome to my channel if you're new, welcome back if you're a subscriber. So today I have the much delayed wrap-up video for some recent reads. I haven't filmed a wrap-up since actually January, so it's been such a long time. I decided to kind of do my wrap-ups in two parts. So I'm going to be doing my June, July, and August wrap-up here, and then I'm going to do my February, March, April, and May wrap-up in another video. Now, this wrap-up isn't just like a normal wrap-up though, it's going to be ranking and reviewing all of the books I've read. So I'm going to start with the worst to the best, so my lowest rated books to my highest rated books. Please stick around to the end though, because I have some really cool books to talk about towards the end that I am obsessed with. Really quick before we get into the video, if you're not subscribed already, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps my channel out. And without further ado, let's get into the video. So for my lowest rated book I have read in the past couple months, it was The Invited, and I'm starting at a 2-star rating. And this is actually the only book that I read that I rated that low, so thankfully no more 2-star ratings. But I wanted to talk about this one really quick. So The Invited by Jennifer McMahon is about a couple moving onto a property and they're deciding to build their dream house there. But the property has a dark past, and the wife actually starts looking into it and starts learning that there were some witchy things that happened in the past, as well as some paranormal activity begins to happen at the property. So this book is a very cozy horror book, and I learned that either this author's way of writing was just not it for me, or this kind of cozy horror genre is just not for me. So it was marketed as a kind of scary haunted house book, or haunted property really, and it just didn't do it for me. I wasn't scared at all. I kind of hated this book, and I hate being so negative on here, but I'm just being completely honest. I really wanted this book to end. I sped it up super fast as I approached the end of the book. I just had to get through it, but I was really forcing myself to finish it because I just really disliked it. So the things I disliked about it were, one, it just not much was happening. The stakes didn't feel too high. It wasn't paranormal enough for me. I think this book would work if someone wants to read something that's technically in the horror genre or in the darker thriller genre, but really just wants a cozy read. It also has some witchy vibes, so if that's something you're looking for, I think you may enjoy this book as well. I know some people really did enjoy this book. It just wasn't the book for me. It was mostly just about the atmosphere and setting the feeling of the town. I noticed that the main character though, the young girl, there's kind of two main characters. So we're following the wife of the couple and then another girl in town, and that girl just seemed to act really young for her age. I don't know if it was just because it was a small town or whatnot, but I just did not connect to that character at all. And then the main character I just wasn't super attached to or interested in. And yeah, I think I was the most interested about the history of what happened in the area, but not so much the characters. So unfortunately, it put me in a huge, gigantic slump. So yeah, that's kind of my wrap up for this book. It just didn't do it for me. So moving on to my 3-star books. So the first one I want to talk about is Serial Cheaters by Olivia Flaggert. This was kindly sent to me by the publisher, and I'm really thankful for that. And actually the cover is adorable. Let me pull it out for you. So this is the ARC, and I love the cover so much. And it was really fun. This was actually the first physical ARC I ever got sent, so this has a special place in my heart for sure. So this author actually owns Thriller Book Lover, and I highly recommend checking out this store as well. They make thriller book themed merch and makeup even. It's super cool, super unique. I actually did an unboxing of one of their boxes. I'll link that above here. But it's also a bookstore, and I would just highly recommend checking it out. It's super cool. But my thoughts about this book. So I gave this one 3 stars, and I will say I was never bored during this at all. It was really fast paced, and it was really kind of had a lot of dark humor in it, which I really appreciated. I wanted more from the detective who was trying to solve this case. We mostly just get the point of view from the serial killer, which was fun to read about, but I really wanted to know about this detective and kind of her journey trying to figure out what was going on. It also ended on quite a cliffhanger, so it appears like this will have a sequel, but I just was a little bit let down by this book because it was compared to They Never Learn, which Spoiler alert, I'm gonna talk about it soon, but this was one of my favorite books I have ever read, and I just absolutely love They Never Learn, and so since this was compared to it, I think it just made me enjoy it a little bit less. And I compared this serial killer to the serial killer in They Never Learn. This book did end on a cliffhanger though, and I think you'll enjoy it if you just want a fast-paced book with some dark humor, and if this concept sounds interesting to you, I would recommend picking it up. The next book I'd like to talk about is The Passengers by John Marrs, and this takes place in Britain in the future where there are self-driving cars, and basically there are a group of people who are driving their separate ways one day, and a hacker takes over their car, says, "I have changed your destination and your route, you no longer have any control over your car, and you are most likely going to die in a couple hours." This is all broadcasted across the nation, and people start commenting on it on social media, and it's this huge kind of shock and event, and everybody is tuning in. So this is a super cool concept. It really reminded me of a Black Mirror episode, and I really enjoy that show. I thought the first 50 to 60% of this book was absolutely excellent. I was really interested in finding out all about the passengers, each one of them, and their unique story. I thought it had some really interesting commentary on how someone can be presented one way online and it can really sway mass opinion, but if not everything is revealed, then you don't get the whole picture on who they are. So I thought the commentary on that was really interesting. I loved the incorporation of live newscasts, and I listened to it via audiobook, and it was really cool because actually I got to hear kind of the news anchor jingles and all of that, and the tweet sounds. I would highly recommend consuming this book that way, and I really enjoyed that. I will say though, the ending of this really brought my star rating down, and it's because it just took a very political kind of turn, and it just wasn't as interesting to me. I felt like the stakes weren't as high, and it just lost a lot of my interest towards the end of the book. Something I love though about John Marrs' writing style is he always just takes right off into the action. There's not much of a build-up, so it's always really exciting from the very beginning, and the chapters are really short, so you feel like you're accomplishing a lot as you read, which is really nice. And I would highly recommend this one if this concept sounds interesting to you. I know most people love this book and rate it higher than I did. I just preferred the one a lot better, and I was way more interested in the one throughout the whole book. So let's move into my 3.5 star books. So the first one I'm going to talk about is The Amityville Horror by J. Anson. This is about a family moving into this beautiful house that they got a very, very good deal on because they found out that the year prior, one of the residents actually killed all of his family. So nobody wanted to move into that house because of the dark history, but the family decides, you know, let's put that behind us. It's a beautiful house. It'll be good for our family. Let's move on in. So something I liked about this book is it's pretty short. So, you know, the action started happening immediately. There wasn't much of a build-up like is kind of usually typical in a haunted house horror novel. So the action started happening right away. I was interested the whole time on what was going to happen to the family. I will say it was very outdated. The father really, really annoyed me. He was bossing around his wife all the time, kind of saying, "Control your children, woman," and all this stuff, and I hated how he treated his family. So that was really, really annoying to read. Also, I read this via audiobook, and oh my gosh, the narrator was not good. I would not recommend the audiobook for this one. I would recommend physically reading it. Also, I was less interested in the storyline that involved the priest. So there was a priest that came in and blessed the house in the beginning of the book, and after he does this, he starts kind of getting sick and getting these negative physical symptoms, and some other negative things start happening to him. So whenever it was the chapters involving the priest, I just wasn't as interested. And so I was always the most interested in the family storyline. It wasn't scary, it never really scared me. There was a scene that did kind of stick with me, and it involved a pig. And I think pigs kind of freak me out in general because they're such smart animals, and I kind of immediately associate pigs in books, not really in real life, but pigs in books with Animal Farm. I don't know if anybody else read that book and had the experience of being kind of traumatized at the end, but that whole allegory was just so haunting, and what happens with the pigs at the end is very disturbing. So let's talk about Ace of Spades, and this cover is extraordinary. Like, this is the most beautiful cover ever, I swear. And this just needs to be an art print in my house. It's that beautiful. So this is a YA thriller, and this book is kind of like Gossip Girl or Pretty Little Liars. It's basically about these two students who go to this elite prep school, and they start being threatened by this anonymous texter who seems to want to expose all of their darkest secrets and ruin their lives, and they have to figure out who it is and how to stop it. So I enjoyed this book. The reason I didn't rate it higher though is because it's a pretty long book. Let's see how many pages it is. It is 419 pages. So I'm not used to reading books that long. I thought it lulled a little bit in the middle. I thought the ending was really, really good and powerful. It had a very powerful message, and the very, very ending I absolutely loved. But the reason I rated it kind of lower is just because of that middle portion that lost my interest a little bit. But I really got attached to these characters and loved learning about their backstories, and this is a very emotional read. Also, please look up the trigger warnings because there is some content in here that's disturbing and could be triggering for some people. But yeah, I would highly recommend this book, and I think it is a very important message. The last book that I rated 3.5 stars is The Stalker by Sarah Alderson. And this is about a couple who decide to go on their honeymoon on a remote island in Scotland. They start to think someone is stalking them though, and they try to survive. So I did enjoy this book, but this is the kind of book that I wanted to be scarier. I thought it was really interesting. I loved all the imagery of the isolated setting and getting the imagery of the island, and there's this castle that's abandoned. I thought that was really fun to read. And this was full of twists. I think the twists were really good, and depends on who you are, you may or may not see them coming. I think my main problem with it was just a little bit too long for my taste, and it also was just not quite scary enough for me. This definitely felt more like a thriller book as well, and I think I would have liked it if it was more of a horror book. I thought it could have gone for it a little bit more with the gore and all of that. So if it was a horror book, I think it would have been higher rated for me. So moving on to my 4-star books. So Just Married by Kiersten Modglin is a very similar concept actually to the last book. So this is about newlyweds, and they're going on their honeymoon, and they go to a remote cabin in the woods. The wife knows about a terrible secret that her husband doesn't know she knows. She starts to wonder if there's more that she doesn't know about her husband and who she really married. If this isn't bad enough, it starts to seem like they're being stalked as well. So this book freaked me out. I was totally freaked out in some scenes of this book. I turned on some creepy cabin ambiance, and it really added to the experience. It was so horrifying, and I absolutely loved it. I loved being freaked out, and it's so hard for that to happen to me. So the fact that this book was able to do that was so exciting for me. This reads a lot like a home invasion novel, and home invasion stuff really freaks me out. This is no news to people on my channel. I talk about this all the time. But kind of after the 60%-ish mark, it sort of took a different turn, and I didn't really like as much where it went, which is so weird because as I was reading it, I was acknowledging these are really good twists. This is a really good story. I think people would love this. But for me, I think I wanted it to just be a little bit more simple and more of a horror novel once again. So the two thrillers I read, I guess I just wanted them to be more like horror novels, which is interesting because if you're really into thrillers, I honestly think you'll love the last two novels I talked about, and I really highly recommend them. So I think it was more of just a me problem. So sorry if my framing is different. I am having major filming difficulties. I don't know what my phone is doing as I record. It keeps not recording things. So bear with me if the framing is different. But let's talk about Camp Slaughter by Sergio Gomez, and I gave this 4.5 stars. So this one is so much freaking fun. I absolutely love it. So it's about this group of college students who go to this cabin in the woods to party it up, but unfortunately for them and fortunately for us, there is a cannibal on the loose who is hunting them down and picking them off one by one. So there is so much gore in this. It's honestly like an homage to 80s horror. It feels a lot like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Friday the 13th, and it is so much fun. You really get some good backstory on the killer, as well as just some really fun scenes to read about, some death scenes that are super creative. It has a lot of humor in it, and it's very campy in the best of ways. So I would highly recommend this if you're into slashers and it's a really fast read. It really reads like a movie, and I would highly recommend this one. That's all I really have to say about it. Sergio Gomez is just a talented author. I seriously love this one. So the next book that I gave 4.5 stars is The Maidens by Michaelides, and I will link my vlog above where I read Gabby Reed's favorite thrillers, and I leave some more in-depth thoughts on this one. But a quick synopsis. This is about a woman named Mariana who's a group therapist, and she is still grieving the death of her husband. Her niece, who she has helped raise forever, who she really considers her daughter, is at Cambridge University, but one of the students is murdered, and this student actually is Zoe's really good friend and roommate. So she goes to Cambridge and tries to comfort Zoe, and also she starts to become suspicious of this Greek tragedy professor and is convinced that he has committed the murders. Now, this professor has a kind of following of these girls who call themselves the Maidens. They're obsessed with him. They're always following him around. And it just kind of dives into this mystery. So this one kind of starts out a little bit slow, but the dark academic atmosphere, which I love, I so love dark academia, it really carried the novel for me, even when it was slow. This author absolutely loves short chapters, and I really love that as a reader. It keeps me super engaged, and I feel like I'm really getting through the story fast, which is super motivating for me. I think Michaelides just has a writing style that clicks with me as a reader. He just writes in this way that sucks me into the atmosphere, which I absolutely love, and he's honestly an auto-buy author for me. The plot twist was super surprising. I did not see it coming. It was a little bit convenient. I thought it was really shocking though, so I can kind of forgive it for being a little bit far-fetched. This book talked a lot about Greek mythology, so if you're into that kind of thing, I think you'd really love it. I'm not personally super into Greek mythology, but it still was interesting to read about in this. And also something that I loved about this novel was there was journal entries and you didn't know who they were from. And so the whole novel I was trying to figure out who these journal entries were from. And I love when books play with timelines and POVs. I find this just so engaging and I always want to keep reading. It's so motivating for me. It just makes me want to get to the end to figure out what happened. Also, I was super suspicious of all of the characters, which I love in a thriller, and I just think Michaelides is going to be an auto-buy author for me, and I'm so excited to see what he comes out with next. I really enjoyed The Silent Patient as well. I gave it the same rating, 4.5 stars. So let's get into my first Grady Hendrix novel that I ever read, which was Horrorstor, and I loved this book. It was so creative. Oh my gosh, I cannot speak highly enough of this book. So this is about a knockoff IKEA, and basically strange things are happening. And so a group of employees decide to stay the night and actually perform a seance. And some paranormal activity starts happening and some madness happens, and it is just such a fun time. So one thing I absolutely loved about this book was the format. So I loved all the pictures. You can see it's formatted like a catalog, which is so fun. And there are pictures, and it's such a fast read this way. It has a lot of references to retail and kind of the annoyances of customers and just what goes along with being a retail worker. And I worked at DSW for many years, so I totally relate to this, and I found it so humorous and funny. Grady Hendrix also wrote some genuinely scary parts, and that's the thing about Grady Hendrix. He is so good at writing horrifying things and disgusting things, but also having so much humor in his books. And he is one of my new favorite authors, I think, just because I don't think anybody out there is doing quite what Grady Hendrix is doing. There were some scenes that just stuck with me. Ugh, just like some disturbing things. I also just loved the feeling of being at this huge warehouse store in the middle of the night. It was such a fun concept. As a kid, I would always imagine, what would it be like to be in a museum, you know, after hours? Or what would it be like to be in a store once no one's there? And this kind of fulfilled that little kid's imagination for me, which I absolutely loved. The atmosphere was wonderful. It was heartfelt. It was funny. I cared about the characters. The gore was on point, and it was just super creative, and I would highly, highly, highly recommend this book to anyone. So my next 4.5-star read is None Shall Sleep by Ellie Marney. This book is about 2 teenagers, and one of them is a serial killer survivor, and they're actually recruited by the FBI to try to track down some juvenile serial killers. They have to interact with one of the most notorious serial killers for help. And I'm actually just going to insert this clip of me talking about it. I tried to do a vlog for the Enneagramathon and it didn't work out. So I'm gonna insert a vlog clip because all of my thoughts are way fresher on my mind. So if you are curious, watch this clip here. Hey, so I decided to share my thoughts on None Shall Sleep. I finished it a couple hours ago and I wanted to share what I thought about it and my wrap up. This book, I have some thoughts. So I rated this 4.5 stars. And this book was really, really, really good. So first of all, I want to say, kind of for context going into this, the whole time I was kind of subconsciously comparing it to The Silence of the Lambs because the feel of it was very, very similar. And so if I had never experienced the story of The Silence of the Lambs, I've only seen the movie, I have not read the book. But if I had never experienced that before, this would definitely be a 5-star read for me. I think the only thing that is preventing it from being a 5-star read is just because the whole time in the back of my head I was thinking, this is so similar to The Silence of the Lambs, which, if you don't know, I love The Silence of the Lambs. I think it's one of my favorite movies of all time, and I really, really want to read the book. I know that it's a part of a series, but I think I'm going to read it as a standalone to start off by. But that's why I didn't rate this 5 stars, just because I thought the originality wasn't fully there. And I understand it though, because, you know, this wasn't exactly copying The Silence of the Lambs. The serial killer that was focused on and who the main character Emma was corresponding with and interacting with a lot gave me very strong Hannibal Lecter vibes. I do understand that a lot of these serial killers sort of operate similarly and manipulate people and get in their minds. So in that way, it wasn't fully copying Hannibal Lecter. There were some differences between this serial killer versus Hannibal Lecter, but in my mind, I was imagining Hannibal Lecter, if that makes sense. So with that aside though, that was a little bit rambly. I really, really enjoyed this book. I really liked how the 2 main characters, so Emma and Belle, actually Belle is Travis's last name. His name is Travis, but he's referred to as Belle throughout the novel. I really liked how they had a platonic relationship or a platonic friendship. Sometimes I feel like in thrillers or books that are pretty intense, if there's a romantic relationship kind of thrown in there, it can distract from the plot. And I really liked their platonic friendship. I really, really enjoyed that aspect of the book. It sounds like this may be the start of a series, kind of how it was ended, totally left it open-ended, and like it could continue being a series. So I don't know if romantic feelings will develop, but I loved their friendship. They had a very special bond throughout the whole book, which was really nice to read about. I loved how the main character was such a strong female lead. I really enjoyed learning about her and getting some insight into her past. She's a final girl, so she was the only girl to escape from the serial killer who was holding her captive. I will say I wanted more information on what happened with the main character when she was in that situation being held by a serial killer in her past. I don't know if that will be talked about in a sequel, if there is a sequel, but I would love to know more of what happened. I mean, it was alluded to a little bit, but not really much. You didn't really learn too much about what happened. I really enjoyed how the author seemed to really do her research behind how procedural things are done in the FBI, and it's very, very obvious that the author took a lot of time, you know, doing research and communicating with people and looking into the psychology of serial killers and everything. At the end of the book, the author acknowledges this, and yeah, overall, I just thought this book was really good. It was very fast-paced. I was never bored once. I always wanted to keep reading, and I cared about the characters. I was very interested in the plot. It definitely went dark. I think it could have gone even darker, but that's just me. And yeah, I really enjoyed this book and I gave it 4.5 stars. This definitely makes me realize that I need to read The Silence of the Lambs very soon, and I am assuming that will be a 5-star read for me. All right, so I'm so excited to talk about my 5-star reads. So these are the top of my tier. I absolutely adore them. And the first one I'm going to talk about is House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland. And this is one of my favorite covers of all time. It is so gorgeous. I did a little cover recreation, or more so just inspired by this, so I'll put a picture of it above. This is a dark fairy tale and it's about Iris Hollow. She is one of 3 sisters who disappeared years and years ago. They all reappeared with identical scars on their throats of a half moon. Each one of the sisters all have a powerful effect on others and can manipulate them very easily. And one sister named Gray goes missing, and they try to figure out what is going on and what has happened to her. So this was just a 5-star feeling book. I got the 5-star feeling. Basically, I was reading it and I was really, really enjoying it. And I got towards the end and there was just this part that it was gut-wrenching and it just got to me, and it absolutely was haunting and beautiful. And I immediately knew at that moment that it would be a 5-star read for me. It was a moment when everything clicked together and you figured out what was happening this whole time, and it was just so, so, so good. So the writing in this book seriously stood out to me. It was so lyrical and eerie and haunting, and it took a lot of things that are traditionally considered beautiful, like flowers, and made them disturbing and haunting. And I thought that this was really, really cool and talented of the author. I absolutely loved hearing about the fashion, how it was incorporated in this novel. One of the sisters is a fashion designer and she kind of wove in some messages in her garments, and I thought learning about this was so cool. I just highly recommend this book. I don't want to say too much about it because I think the mystery adds to the intrigue of the book and you'll just really, really enjoy it. It was very fast-paced. It's a YA novel and I just recommend it. It was really dark. It went way darker than I thought, and it really has a grim fairy tale vibe because it goes so dark and it is so haunting. I just cannot speak highly enough of this book. My most anticipated book of the whole year is Survive the Night by Riley Sager, and it did not disappoint. I gave this one 5 stars. So this is about Charlie, and she catches a ride from a ride board in the 1990s from this stranger, and basically she starts to think he actually may be the campus killer who killed her roommate and has been murdering girls on the college campus. And she has to figure out how to survive the night in this car trapped with this killer. So this was such a good book to me. There was a little bit of an unreliable narrator situation going on, which I don't always love, but I loved how Riley Sager did it in this book. I love the references to classic film and how the main character really loved film. I was really invested in this character, and I know a critique of this book is that the main character made some dumb decisions that people just didn't really understand. But I think if you look at her psyche and what she's been through and really understand fully her character, I think it does kind of make sense why she made these decisions. So if you can put aside kind of wanting to shake the character and be like, why are you doing this? And understand she's doing this for a reason, it will help you enjoy this book better. I loved kind of the timeline of it, how it was surviving the night. It made it so fast-paced. The tension in this book was amazing. The atmosphere was super good. It was I just love Riley Sager so much. I don't know what to say. He's my favorite author. Just everything he writes, I always end up enjoying. This book was so emotional. At the end, I literally cried. It was touching, and it takes a lot to make me cry in a book. This was the first book that made me cry, which is a big deal. I would highly recommend this book if you like isolated settings and really tense rides. I just literally and figuratively intense rides in a car. So yeah, I would highly recommend this one. I don't have much more to say. You just have to read it. I did a whole vlog reading this book also in 24 hours, so I would recommend checking that one out to see my reactions and just my thoughts and me tearing up at the end of the book. All right, you all, I reached the last book, my other favorite book probably I've read this whole year, and it is The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. Grady Hendrix did it again, I swear. This book, it's so good. It makes me so happy. This is about a group of housewives in the 1990s, and they form this book club where they kind of get some excitement in their life. Their everyday life is being a housewife and just taking care of their children and their husbands and cleaning and cooking, and it's a little mundane, and so they want some excitement. So they read about some serial killers and they find this group for some entertainment and escape from their life. One day though, this person moves into town and he seems a little odd, and Patricia, the main character, starts to suspect he may or may not be a vampire. And so this title kind of gives away what it's about, but it's so much more than just the title. The humor in this book is so good. You care about the characters. It's so emotional. I cried at the end of this book as well, which is just amazing for me. This is the second book that I've cried in, and I've read a lot of books, so that means a lot. I thought it was genuinely scary, and I was rooting for the characters so much. I cared about the characters so much. It was just so good. I feel like I'm at a loss of words. I feel like I described the earlier ones a little better than the ones I absolutely loved, because I just get so excited about them. So the gore in this was so good. There was a scene that was genuinely scarring. People will talk about it. The infamous cockroach scene in this. Wow. Barely made it through that scene, but I made it. Yeah, the gore was so good. I thought the humor was hilarious. This book took me about 100 pages to get into, and so I was a little worried I wouldn't like it and it wouldn't pick up, but it's so cool. It covers multiple years. You get a really good insight into these characters' lives, especially the main character, and you start to really feel attached to them. And I think that's what made it such an effective read. You really feel a part of this character's life. And just the girl power in this book is amazing. I think it's such a little feminist twist, and I just love it. I love it so much. The cover is so good, and I'm so glad that this cover did not disappoint me, because sometimes I see books with amazing covers and I'm like, I swear if that's a bad book, that's gonna suck, because I half bought it for the cover, to be honest. Once again, you know, this is a little bit of a slow burn, but it pays off so well. It really does. And there's so many themes of just family and just badass women. I just love it. And you know, it's about slaying a vampire, and it's amazing. Do I need to say more? I don't think so. So that is my ranking and review. If I had to choose my absolute favorite book out of all of these, I think I would say The Southern Book Club's Guide. It's just so good. It's unbeatable. I absolutely adore it. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I will be putting out my wrap up of the books I read in the earlier months of this year. I'm so excited to talk more about these books with you all, and I will talk to you all very soon. Bye.